The following program may be disturbing to some sensitive viewers, especially those who have been victims of rape and sexual assault. These stories are personal tales chronicled by characteristics of self-abuse, abuse, and recovery. May God watch down on the girl who got stabbed by this boy, now a man. Viewer discretion is advised.
In the summer of 2019, a vicious stabbing occurred at a music camp at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. The victim was a 13-year-old girl who met a boy named Mikey Ko the previous year. She almost was raped and sexually assaulted in a locker room at the IU Music Center and was stabbed multiple times in the thigh and stomach. As vicious as the crime was that Mikey committed, no one sounded the alarm until I came into the picture. I am Bear-Lents, and I was once a victim of bullying and insults from Mikey Ko. I was a victim of middle school shoving the problem away to make me feel worse. I bullied myself in 2016 and committed suicides multiple times until my final one in March of 2017. Since then, I have been stable, got help and the right treatment, and I graduated high school and will be an incoming sophomore at Vincennes and Indiana University. It took me a while to get into a stable discussion about this boy, but here I go as hard as it was. This is my story of encountering a rapist, a bully, and a classmate. This is time to be unchained.
Before we start, we have to inform our regular podcast listeners that Mikey Ko recently testified in a Monroe County courthouse in July of 2021, where he became face-to-face with the girl who was 13 that he attacked. Her mom, Nina Behringer, spoke to the Herald Times by saying how disgusted Bloomington, Indiana judge Miss Fawcett brought down Mikey's sentence to 9 years on house arrest because of reasons of anxiety and depression, infuriating the family of the slain and battered girl. Then, as we wrote the script for this show, Ko decided to tell a 39-year-old inmate from the Clay County Jail in Brazil, Indiana, to kill both the girl's dad and 14 other people in a vicious attack. Now pronounced as Dongwook Ko and possibly being sentenced to South Korea, he will now be tried again for conspiracy of murder, since his sentencing is still pending after these threats. And now, on with the podcast.
Part 3. Meadows, Campania, and again, Mikey. This part has been condensed, and I would also like to mention in our last episode, I will mention another fact from our last episode that I forgot to mention. So, I will make sure I bring that up, and let's get started with the story. You walk into a Bob's restaurant with barely anyone who understands the two terms bipolar and discussion, and do you have problems or what? I was a 13-year-old boy turning 14 years old in 3 more days on August 7th of 2015, who was still fixating on which girl I should ask out. My great-aunt Jean took me to a surprise birthday party at a restaurant to celebrate at Bob's in Washington, Indiana. At the party, there were about over 60 guests inside that room, who all sat at different tables and had different routines. They had lemonade. I do remember there was 2 guys behind us that had babies, and they had to take care of them. At the party, our friends Tim and Tracy, my cousins Rick, Garrett, Griffin, and Jamie, his wife, all attended the event at a table fit for kings. 15 seconds into the dinner, Fox News buzzed over the TV screens of the restaurant, blazing Donald Trump's iconic moment with Megyn Kelly when he said, "Only Rosie O'Donnell," and "Yes, I'm sure was." And then, during that time period, This was when he was saying on Fox News, "He's got blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever." Blazing Donald Trump from the previous night's Republican primary presidential debate was what was on the TV. 15 seconds after Rick had sat down and taken his plate and we had ordered our food, he said, "Braden, did you know that Donald Trump is running for president?" And then this autistic type voice, I said, what? Donald Trump? You know, like the guy that was on Celebrity Apprentice? And then a debate started where the debate was going on with Tim and Tracy Brown Salzman, who were gay, and they were respectively gay because they had visited Washington, D.C. and fought for equal justice for LGBT, but they had started an argument. Then Gene said that Donald Trump was just blowing smoke. Tim and Tracy kept on saying how Donald Trump was a sex offender and how he had been with a bunch of women and dated 3 and married 3 women and had dated multiple women. And then Jamie woke up the fight and said, okay, now everybody calm down. This moment not only shaped my life, but it also brought down a really big part of myself that I had to recapture again, especially when I got older. I was 14, influenced by the people around me. These people I would hang out with until 2016, when my mental health and my life began to spiral out of control. These people were supposed to be my family. These people were my family at the time. And these people were meant to watch over me as my mom and sister took care of my grandmother, who had Alzheimer's at the time, and she was still progressing through the disease, so she was staying in home care, and mom had nowhere else to put me. So instead, she took me out to Rick's every single week until 2016, or sometimes I drove in the golf cart until 2016, and we would hang out. But these conversations not only changed me, but it changed my political stance, and of course, it changed my life. Not in a positive way, except for Trump. "2016 was a rough year. Donald Trump, of course, was running for president of the United States, as I had mentioned. The most popular song of that time was Juju on That Beat, and I was stationed at Bloomington Meadows Hospital more than 3 times, as mentioned in the last episode. I remember visiting the facility at Bloomington Meadows one last time in April of 2016, and I said I will never get out again. I will never stay in here again. My apologies. I will never stay in here again. From that moment forward, it seemed like progress was in the nearing, because I had started doing the wraparound services program, although I was deeply unmedicated, deeply, deeply hurt, and I was deeply saddened by the loss of my grandfather still, and I was still using social media as the closest thing to crack cocaine. During my time getting recovery, I remember my mom was going to drive me out to the Bloomington Meadows Hospital to evaluate with Mary Bawley, who was my, at the time, psychiatrist, or family practice, and she was continuing her mission to help me out during this trying time. But I do remember my mom saying, "Why can't you just get better and just straighten up?" And I kind of froze, not in a bad way, but in a way that could have changed me, but she wanted me to change. And as I said with the people in the beginning, they were negatively influencing my life. Garrett, Griffin, and Jamie were all culprits of what had led up to my mental health issues by dragging me into a political debate during a time when I was not ready to count down the final seconds of the debate clock. I mean, this isn't Harvard's debate team. These were rednecks from Lagodi, Indiana, trying to influence my life, influence who I was, and influence my mental health. Because not only was I obsessed with Trump, but I also changed to Bernie Sanders. I changed to Hillary Clinton. Every week there was a different political candidate, according to my mom. I had remembered a time period in my life never this bad, but this was bad. My grandmother had had Alzheimer's, and she was still struggling. And in April 2016, she had moved into the Emerald Place Assisted Living Facility in Washington, Indiana. And at that time, she was continuing to receive care there as we hired 2 caregivers, Leslie from the previous year and Donna, a close family member. I remember just feeling struggled, and my mom was talking to a man by the name of Derek Warland, who had been hiding himself underneath the Cubs blanket and having a bottle of tequila ready for him to go and ready for him to sip when we first met him, when he said, "Amy, you're my superwoman." That was what he had told my mom at the time. And she thought, oh, I have just found the love of my life throughout a trying time period. Also, 2016 was the arrival of middle school, ending middle school. Back again, we go to April of 2016, and now we are approaching the month of May, where flowers and roses became the possibility, but instead a dark looming cloud loomed over me. My last day of school was sometime between May 26th to May 28th of 2016, and I had remembered my mom had taken me to see my sister, who was doing a program at her elementary school, University Elementary, where I went to school. And I had remembered her trying to have fun, and the teachers were all asking my mom, "What is happening to Braden? Aren't you supposed to be at Tri-North?" And then my mom just didn't want to say, "Oh, my son got out of the psych unit today." She didn't want to say, "Oh, Braden, he's been having issues, mental health issues, and we don't know what they are." She just froze in time and froze in spirit. She wanted to protect me in all ways more than one. I valued it later, especially with the later stories that I will be telling in these next few episodes. It is incredible that my mom is even living, but just dealing with that really broke her heart. Throughout that summer of 2016, I became very physically and emotionally drained and aggressive. My great aunt Jean, who is a total and complete narcissist, and I don't mean that exaggerating. I mean that seriously. She was a narcissist and suffered from narcissistic personality disorder. She had negatively influenced my life just like Garrett and them had. In April of 2016, I had stolen $100 from my cousin's account, from my cousin's wallet, and he had said that I was never invited back. So my great aunt used that as a scapegoat, as a learning tool. Maybe we can try to influence Braden's life by saying that he's a troubled youth, and by saying, oh, he stole $100 in a way to steal money, like this is going to be his future. I do remember one night I got really physically aggressive with my mother, unmedicated, very unstable. I was very just not around the edges, of course. The chocolate was just crushed. The chocolate bar was crushed. And there was no way I could just pick up the pieces. But she threatened to call the police that night and said, "Brady, do you want me to call the police on you?" And she had threatened this multiple times. Same with Garrett and same with Rick Bell. They all negatively influenced my life starting on that night because not only was I was not interested in political debate, but I was also not interested in this issue. They criticized me for being a Bloomington boy. They criticized me that my mental illness was because I had smoked weed with hippies all day, and that my behaviors were still out of control because my mom is just a terrible person. We moved to Bloomington to get away from Vincennes public schools, not to deal with mental health issues. And that I had said multiple times, and my family didn't listen. In July of 2016, I was about ready to go to Bloomington High School North, when all of a sudden, I had started doing better. I had started doing better at that time, around this time, in July through August. I remember walking into Bloomington North that August and being prepared in July and August, and then them clapping. They were doing this. "Welcome to Bloomington North. Welcome to Bloomington North." That was what a lot of the kids had done when they were working with the orientation. Every sophomore at that time helped with this project. We had danced to Juju on That Beat, and then a little mix where we competed with the sophomores. I remember reporters asking me my name and asking me, I'm going to put this in the paper, so would you like to write this down for me, and can we use your photo? So there was a man who asked me for that, even though we were dancing and playing games. It was a lot of fun. The biggest problem, Mikey was at Bloomington North. Yes, Mikey was at Bloomington North. And I remember him being a very quiet kid. As I said, he was quiet and timid the entire time when I had met him. The previous April, he had confessed to making the Instagram account that allowed me to continue bullying myself. He made one, and I made all 9. And so they had suspended him on a lighter sentence. At home, he was quiet. At school, he was quiet. I remember him being timid. I remember him we said hi to him, and he said, "Hi. I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. Yeah, leave me alone. Yeah, leave me alone." He was a very quiet kid compared to me, who was outgoing and tender and very, very, very outspoken, even though I'm dealing with mental health issues. I do remember them putting me in a ring where I was going to be dancing or else, and everybody encouraged me to do so. I didn't want to dance, and I knew that I developed mental health issues because once I saw Mikey, all hell broke loose at Bloomington North. My very first day of school was my birthday, August 9th, 2016. And volleyball girls were beginning to dance to Juju on That Beat. And I started my very first day as a freshman at Bloomington High School North, where it is great to be a cougar. Not great in the eyes of a cougar, but I never thought that this animal would be attacking me and basically sending me into a spiraling downhill spiral, because I had said the next day Mikey Ko bullied me online when really I made it up. And so to start the school year, it was bad. And then August 12th of 2016 happened, where I was in the kitchen at my apartment. I had scarfed down at least 22 heart vitamins, not pills, vitamins. And I faked an overdose so I could go back to Bloomington Meadows Hospital and endure the same pain, and which I thought was going to be healed. I never thought I would be enduring another battle again. This battle was different. It started on the day I decided to get better in July, and it ended tragically where my family with Rick and Garrett and Griffin did not want to see me ever again. In a way, we were growing, but in a way, there was a lot of trouble. After scarfing down 22 vitamins at home, I remember going back to the music choir room, and I remember being in there, and I told a girl that I had overdosed. So they immediately sent me to the hospital after I'd been in the nurse's office. And I had rode in the back of a police car next to a woman that I had never met before, a female officer who knew that I had mental health issues. This was a very sunny day, to say the least, and it was blue skies, sunny, beautiful, beautiful summer day. But that day was about to turn into a nasty fog, and the other days would too, as the rain began pouring down on what was my life and my schooling and my family's life too. My mom had no idea what was happening, so she was really scared. I remember her saying that she was wondering why I'd even take vitamins, and she was furious with me, and she tried to help me out in any way she could, but she was still very furious. This was, as they say in baseball, strike three, you're out of here, in terms of my mental health, as I was out of the house again and back at Bloomington Meadows Hospital, where I had spent 2 weeks inside their acute unit before being transferred on August 28th to the Residential Treatment Center unit inside the hospital, or RTC. The very first day was actually pretty interesting. Very first day I got inside Meadows RTC, I had my scrubs on, I had worn hospital socks for days so my feet were soiled, and I remembered being in the acute unit and them not even helping me that much. But I remember seeing posters there that said, Herschel Walker is coming to Bloomington Meadows Hospital to speak. And I thought to myself, is he really coming to the hospital to speak, or is this made up? And then the man I had met on this day, the very first day, the kids were wearing eyeliner next to their eyes, and they were wearing tape across their cheeks. And I had remembered seeing Herschel Walker that day. That was the very first day I knew. I knew that day from the bottom of my heart because a staff member named TK had left and gone on vacation for about 2 weeks. And during that time, he was the reason why Herschel Walker came. That guy is built. The guy is super built. And I'd never seen any muscles like that in my life. He is the true definition of a man in terms of his mechanical muscles, which they looked mechanical, and his muscles were just huge. He signed footballs for a lot of us kids, and I remember a guy named Devin who was a staff member on the unit, white guy with blonde hair. He said, "What about he was in the back, and he'd said, "What about Donald Trump? How do you feel about Donald Trump becoming the president?" And he didn't really say anything much, but I do remember him signing a very ugly football I had that somebody had given to me on the unit. It was my very first day meeting kids and meeting legends. One legend, of course, in Herschel Walker, Heisman Trophy winner, USFL player. And I wanted to be just like him, where I had grown up and done something big. But that took a lot of time and energy. As the next thing I am going to discuss with Bloomington Meadows may be kind of disturbing. It was a memorable unit, but also very, very, very tragic. In 2016, I remember meeting Mary Bawley, who was my doctor at the time, Dr. Mary Bawley. Her daughter Issa had sang in the choir with me at Tri-North Middle School in 7th grade year. At the time, my family had thought that she was a really good person as she swindled us off our feet, and then she persuaded my mother to go to the RTC program and put me in it. During that time, the girls were, quote, having helicopter rides and going on trampoline visits and actually meeting celebrities and having fun. These were the girls on the RTC unit that Meadows had talked about at the time, which was not only negatively painting the hospital, but also was their big marketing strategy to use to influence children to get help and treatment. It was more than just that at Meadows. It was miscabobulated, which they didn't tell you about. They said there was high-flying helicopters and balloons that the girls had been on. It was full of abuse, which had not been depicted, as they said the staff members are so nice, including therapist Joe, the other therapist Derek, who both run a sauna in Bloomington, Indiana, and a nurse who had possibly been one of the worst nurses I've ever met, and he should have been working at somewhere such as the Lake County Juvenile Center or Indiana State Prison in Hammond. His name was Brian, and he had a bunch of tattoos and looked like a former gang mob mentality. He had this gang mob mentality. He didn't really care about the patients in that unit, as my heart is actually beating a little bit talking about this. This is the first time I will say there was physical, sexual, and emotional abuse inside that unit. Staff members would constantly check girls' weight and height. They would touch girls in the butts and stomachs. They would make sure that every girl was pimped and pampered. And we were just continuing to kill ourselves, try to use anything. Nails. I had used fingernails to scratch my arms. I had used I tried to use a piece of cardboard as a key to get out of the unit. This was like this between August of 2016 through December of 2016 when the unit was going to shut down for this reason. Joe had said to us in a day in November that it was for money reasons why the unit was going to shut down. And I remember seeing all 20 of us crying our eyes out. It was the most emotional moment I have ever had in my life. I had felt not only pale-stricken for these people, but also it made me realize how much this world is evil, how much this world is toxic, and how much this world can be so triggering to a lot of people. I had seen girls have their clothes off on the unit. I had seen wild animals, basically. We were wild animals in the Indianapolis Zoo. We were dolphins swimming in the water, and we go up and attack other people. We were filled with unmedicated people because of what Mary Bolly had done on that unit. She not only took out herself, but she also made me disconnected from Issa, and she's a horrible person because she had left the RTC unit to go off to another job and leave us hanging. She decided to work at Meadows Outpatient. And we had a doctor, a big old quack named Dr. Perry Griffith. Dr. Perry Griffith. Sorry, it took me a minute. Dr. Perry Griffith, which was possibly the worst doctor I had ever met in my life. And I would say that because he not only took over our unit and all of our case management, and he was the case manager, he was prescribing medicine, he was a very built man, which really explains a lot about built men in general, but he was especially built and swindled all of us on our feet, all of us kids on our feet, even though he barely talked to us. We would be outside, about me and 12 other kids who needed the most discipline, and we'd run around this tiny square where tires take over grass and grass take over tires. And I remember running and holding this gas can up to my head and holding these two gas cans up near me. And a bodybuilder type mantra. He had this boom, 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 like Mike Tyson. He'd pound us like Mike Tyson for walking and running. And we'd endure exercises only NFL players have ever dealt with. And we were trying to be he wanted us to be bodybuilders. And I remember Joe one time said, from the encouragement of Dr. Perry Griffith, he said that at Bloomington, that we were going to form a football team at Bloomington North, and some of us needed to be on the team. So he handed us flyers and posters, and he said, this is where you go, this is who you contact, just make sure you contact these people and ask your parents about it. We never informed parents about this, but basically, Perry Griffith, Derek, and Joe were doing more than just making us feel better and be more medicated. He was ruining us. They were ruining the unit, and they were ruining all of us as human beings. They used us as athletes and people that could make money for them, and not as therapy treatment, where he could have used us not as guinea pigs, but guinea pigs who would be running around freely, happily, and never have to endure another day of pain ever again with mental illness. That explains why Joe had left the unit and had left all of us stranded. There were girls that had gone to Plymouth. There were boys that had gone to other mental health facilities. I was going home like 3 or 4 other people that I had met, and Joe was thinking about putting 2 people in state hospitals, which in fact was not true. The longest patient was a boy named Mike, and he had stayed on the unit at Meadows for over 18 months. Even after Meadows RTC closed, he stayed on the acute unit for an additional 8 months and had stayed there for over 18 months before being released in July of 2017. Overall, it was a disaster at the unit. It was not only a complete tragedy, but I have a drum with every kid's signature on it that we had used for music therapy classes, and we used it, and I use it to pound my way across life, to pound my way across the stroke of every person that I had met. And this was used as a powerful symbol for not only me, but for everybody else that was in the unit, as I use them every day as my stones. They are my rocks, and I look up to them every single day ever since then. Going into 2017, there was a lot of unrealistic expectations. I was going to get better. I was going to get treatment. I was going to have a therapist, a woman that had worked in Canada. I had been released from Meadows. What else could you ask for, right? Just like the fans walking into an arena, they were waiting to see the new champs. They were waiting to see the new heavyweight boxer that could have been knocking out Jake Paul every day, bro. We could have seen two gladiators go against each other and find one possible solution. In fact, between January of 2017 to March of 2017, I had committed suicide. Imagine yourself inside a football stadium. It's the NCAA National Championship of 2017 between Tony Brown, Nick Saban, and Jalen Hurts, the Alabama Crimson Tide, going up against Clemson and Deshaun Watson, who is playing his last game, and Hunter Renfrow at tight end. The stadium is filled with fans seeing me walk around the entire parking lot of my apartment, running down the stairs of one apartment to the next, asking people in townhouses, there's someone after me, there's someone after me, there's someone after me, can you please help me, can you please take me in? And then the voices in my head of psychosis are going, he's gonna get you, I'm gonna get you, Braden, I'm gonna get you, Braden, I'm gonna get you, Braden, I'm gonna get you, Braden. Taking the place of that. And I remember running down near a church, running to the back of the end zone and then back out to the hands of police who had given me a stern warning after meeting with my parents and said that I was going to receive a warning, and they had known after that moment that I was suffering from severe psychosis and I was doing all I could to try and help myself, but I was also struggling. That night in the national championship, my mom had to see me struggle in the hallway. She had to see me unmedicated and not right. She had seen me physically aggressive with everybody in there, and Meadows still did not take me for the final time that I had ever been in that building. February 11th of 2017, I had taken pills the night before, and that night, and my mom had driven me crying her eyes out. And I kept on going in the hospital, just like the demon coming out of me saying, I am crazy. That was me inside a Bloomington hospital. The night before, I danced with Bruce Borders in a hound dog type of move for the halftime performance, making Reese Davis, Lee Corso, Kirk Herbstreit, and the rest of the gang crack up, as they had seen a boy who had previously been in the hospital the night before for his first overdose attempt in a while, and then they see him succeeding and actually getting out and dancing with the icon himself, Elvis impersonator and Indiana State Senator Bruce Borders. That day I was not right as I ate at Arby's, and I remembered feeling a life of luxury. For some reason, it felt like I could have gotten better, but then I didn't get better as I started dancing a lot more, getting my life under control. And then, boop. Happened again. Another overdose. And then, one day inside my great aunt's bathroom, I had taken a half a bottle of pills, Tylenol PM, and I had taken pills again. And I remember Jean was bawling her eyes out, Mom was bawling her eyes out, and I felt like I was so drunk from the hypnosis and the psychosis of taking Tylenol PM that I was regularly peeing on near a chair in the hospital. I was inside the hospital and then didn't receive my medicine. And then my mom had to run in and try to get them for me. And then I bashed in the door when I got back home and started attacking my parents, my mom, and partially my sister. Then the door opened and it swung near my mom's room as I kicked the bottom of it. And then I had to go back to Jean's house after that incident as I was attempting to run away again as a wild 15-year-old boy became a living demon running from hell. I had never felt this in my entire life. My life was black. My eyes were black. I remember trying online school, and I had Mom do every single one of my assignments because I just slept. I ran away five total times, and I had overdosed 3 times over the course of January through March of 2017. Then I remember being at Gene's house, as I'm getting back into the story. I remember Rick saying, "You're going to go somewhere a lot worse than Meadows." I'm going to call that Drew Bledsoe. Can I please talk to him right now? Then my final suicide attempt was on March 20th of 2017, as Deshaun Watson was making a final play in the 2017 National Championship. Down near his goal line, down near the Alabama goal line, he stood firm like I did at the house, staring down at a balcony and flipping out over a bedtime. Put my mother in a chokehold, and then I remember seeing my sister and shoving her. Down the stairs I went, running to the end zone. And I remember Joe Buck, if he was on the call, he'd say, "Braden with the snap. Braden looking, running away still. The quarterback, Stafford's going to throw it. No, he's running up the stairs at Crescent Park. He's running up there. Pass is, oh my God. What an injury. Caught or touchdown. He's attempted suicide again. His ears are ringing from the impact.
After the jump, it was determined that I broke my part of my back, my T12 L4 with an L2 burst fracture. I was then transported to the IU Bloomington Hospital, where my mother, my grandaunt, and my cousin Rick and Brianna were all there, trying to comfort me and warm me throughout that trying time. But little did I know that Rick was telling my mother to get in the ambulance, and they were not going to drive her home. I had then gone from there to IU Methodist, where the next day I endured a 5-hour surgery. My mother had to go through maze after maze after maze, she told me. And then a preacher decided to come over to her and ask her what was wrong, because that's how much of a mess she was. The surgery was successful, and I was able to recover in about a week at the hospital, where I then went to Riley Children's Hospital on March 28th. And then, after 2 weeks of staying, I was then sent by a man named Ed to Campania Academy in Cherryville, Indiana, a residential treatment center and a boys' school. On April 14th, I was finally admitted to Campania, and I learned the value of life throughout the first 2 weeks of going there, as the kids loved having me, and of course I played the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns in Madden 17. But I went through all 4 phases of the unit and learned how there is a 4 quintillion chance and quintillion reasons why I should be alive. Throughout my stay at Campania, it was well worth it. I had a total of 39 staples that were taken out, and I was able to rehab my entire back while at a Methodist hospital in Merrillville, Indiana. I had learned the power of DBT and meditation from my therapist, who we'll call Mug. The entire unit was caring about everyone that went there and everyone that was going there. Every child felt like someone. On July of 2017, as my mother and I were walking down a Dollar General in Merrillville, on the Merrillville-Cherryville border, we were trying to grab candy when I discussed to my mother the eventual transition from going to Bloomington North to then going back to Bloomington High School South. As she said, my mother shook her head like this and she went, "South." Okay. A new transition was upon us, as my therapist Meg decided to call a woman from Bloomington South, a special education coordinator named Barb Stork. Finally, after completing most of the phases in a total of 4 months, I had learned about my discharge from a phone call as my mother said, "What time should I be there on the 20th?" It was then determined on October 20th of 2017 I was going back home. I went back to living with my mother and Brianna full time, and that itself was a big transition. One of my fondest memories at Campania was probably reading the Chicago Sun-Times and the Northwest Indiana Times, as those fueled my energy to become a journalist and become it even more, because at that time, when I was around my cousin Rick, I wanted to be white and a Republican for some reason. But I'm glad that Campania showed me the true meaning of being black, because instead of shaking hands, we joined arms. I was able to go back home on the 20th and live with my mother and sister for full time. We got onto a 4-hour car ride, which resulted into a trip to a Five Guys in Terre Haute, which in fact was good, but I was too shooken up to go anywhere except for Portillo's hot dogs. On October 25th, I walked inside the doors of Bloomington South, a school decorated in history as it was once called Bloomington High School, home of the Panthers. But the Panthers name stayed on, as our school is famous for the Riley Dance Marathon fundraising, and if you're from Carmel, please don't hate me for this, but I think we have one of the best FTKs in the state. And we are also famous for our sports teams and an IU athlete named Anthony Leal. On October 25th, I went inside Bloomington South and I officially met the people that worked there. Amy Coyle, Aaron Parker, Greg Marshall, Pat Cannon, and of course, Barb Stork. After an IEP meeting was done with both my wraparound treatment program and the school, I found a new surrounding in my high school which had never seemed but daunting at the time. I wasn't scared, I wasn't nervous, but I was determined to go out to Bloomington South and make my scars look beautiful, as Alicia Cara would sing as I first went to school on October 30th of 2017. So how I got connected with the Bloomington South TV show, our SRT show as we called it. It was November 4th, and the kid who was supposed to be our co-anchor that day was out at a track meet in Florida. And I asked the teacher at the time, Dan Kennedy, who would later become a true angel and a true icon for me, an inspiration, who opened me up. I told him that I would like to co-host with a boy who also ran track named Teddy Lashley. And I told him, I want to be on the SRT show. And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes, I'm sure." And from there, the rest is history.
Good morning, South. Today is November 6th, 2017, and this is your SRT show. I'm Teddy.
And my name is Braden.
And we will be hosting the show this week. Thanks, Student Council. Let's all pitch in to support a good cause. If you want to sponsor a child or just make a donation, you can go to the bookstore to make your donations. So, Braden, have you ever ran a 5K?
No. But I really want to.
Well, you're in luck.
Before we get to our next topic, I want to give a big shout out to South's very own debate team. He has had a consistent season so far in the 100 butterfly and will be swimming this weekend at sectionals.
Ladies and gentlemen, and after wearing a team jersey, but you are still a representative of your high school. Please conduct yourself in regular flight spots to be on your team.
Day, Veterans Day, even with their passing, I still honor with pride these heroes that I call my family.
But, my family, obviously, I'd say, is here at home, and they're not at school except for my mom, who I see at school every day.
Basically been going to all the practices. And
after a disappointing season last season, the Indiana...
But I knew in my heart, nobody else did, but I knew in my heart that I was going to make it big. Through all of these obstacles, there came a point in my life where my life was just getting back to normal. But nothing was smooth, as my grandmother still had a crippled body, and in 2019 she would be in a vegetative state. My junior year, which was the next year I started South as a sophomore, was where I found out that I would be going to VU. And before March, I was about to get recognized for a scholarship from the Monroe County Community School Corporation and the IU Credit Union Bank. The ceremony was to be taking place in April at the historic IU Student Union and Hotel. I also suffered from borderline personality disorder. And on one fateful day in March, as the NCAA tournament rolled on, I attempted to ask a girl named Clara out in a single sign of impulse. And the next day, I bullied her and got suspended for 3 days. As people were wondering, what the heck, Braden? Why did you do that, Braden? What was happening to you? My medicine was off. I had to be going on a laxative where I had to go to the bathroom every single day for it to help. My medicine at the time was Depakote and Zyprexa, but I was also taking the laxative, which fueled my ammonia. As of April of 2019, I was able to stay at Bloomington South through a parental talk we had with Barb Stork, me and my mother, at a Panera Bread in Bloomington. During that time, I had to stay with a man named Mr. Bonder, who helped me be my security guard for 7 whole weeks before the school year ended. But I disappointed my faculty, I disappointed the staff members. It took me a year of bashing my head into an invisible wall to try to get me back on my feet. The one thing that really kept me on my feet throughout the behavioral issues between me and my sister were 2 people. My special needs counselor, Barb Stork, and my grandmother, Jane, but especially Barb. Although I would later be recognized for the scholarship in 2020, it became uncertain about when and how I would receive it. One thing was for sure. Barb Stork kept me in line and directed me to listen to my heart and to my family. She did a lot for me and my family, including driving me to 5 track and field meets and 3 softball games, buying me candy at both the Bloomington IU hospital when I was getting my medication switched, and she gave me candy and a chocolate bar when I was getting my appendix out. Speaking of the medication switch, in September of 2019, I was finally prescribed a medicine that has been working now for over 2 years, lithium and hydroxyzine. To this day, I feel confident. I feel like my scars have healed, and I feel like venturing into a world of journalism which people had feared since high school I would not respond well to. I have done exposure therapy to the news, and it saved my life because...
And that was my life story. As much as graphic as it was also a reminder to me to keep moving forward, to keep battling myself until I break. Not in a negative way, but in a positive way. When I was at Vincennes University, I was reminded of how poor I really was after I became an arrogant and cocky kid, as I had admired myself being a campus tour guide, working on Blazer Vision, and not only that, but just realizing what my mom's childhood was like. This part was all about my life. The next part will be all about the life of Mikey Ko, as I had tried mentioning that I met Mikey at Bloomington North. And not only that, it just really, this podcast is just really helping me let this pain from 2016 to 2020 go. After graduating from Vincennes University in 2021, I will be heading to Indiana University in January to continue majoring in media and to continue majoring in journalism, as I finally found myself, and I've grown up a lot. My mother has been the victim of narcissistic abuse for over 40 years, and just being this and just finding out stories about Mikey and doing all the research and doing everything I could, it just reminds me of one thing. My great aunt could possibly kill my mom and sister by doing the same things that Mikey has done. This is a scary time period in not just my life, but in the world. With COVID-19, school shootings are becoming the new part of American culture today. Not only that, but we're living in a time where the mentally ill are becoming challenged, and people are just bringing guns for attention because they're not either getting love at home or they're just complete and utter narcissistic personality disorder cases. We live in a very bad time period. I live in fear every day for my sister, who has to go to a public school at Jackson Creek Middle School and endure the same such pain that I have endured throughout my life. During the next part, however, I will talk about the story of how I met Mikey at Bloomington High School South. And through that journey, it not only saw me, but it also saw through him. Forgiveness, love, and murder. That was what this life has been. And yes, we have a lot of mentally ill people, such as Mikey Ko, who are walking around the world today, and they're saying, what should I do to kill the next person? What should I do next? Should I treat this person nice or confidently, or should I treat them like crap? With this mentally ill culture, it is good that I'm talking about my mental health history. Because not only that, this can be a history lesson for a lot of people, but Mikey Ko also has a very deep and sinister one too. He didn't get help, however, and that's kind of a spoiler for the next episode of UnChained. Thank you so much for listening to my first part, as my mother and I are still trying to help each other out. I have felt like a therapist, a caregiver, and a psychologist throughout the entire time I've not only written this documentary, but also dealt with my mom's life. Because, quite honestly, I don't want kids. I don't want any other kids to have to go through this. I really don't. Murder is such a terrible thing. We're seeing this in our schools. We saw this with Eric Crumley at Oxford High School. And it's now a TikTok trend out of all things. It's so tragic with the world we're living in today. It's tragic even for me, especially after COVID. I don't see humanity getting better. The top 1% are getting the most charge in laws and money and clothes and jewelry and everything. Everything we own, everything we buy, everything we watch is being controlled by these people. This podcast, I'm hoping, is a big, 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 big history lesson. So we can influence our children to not only do better, but to not only stop murders, but to also prevent them from happening. Thank you so much for listening to part 3 of the UnChained podcast, the story of Mikey Dongwook and the potential rapist that he would become. Again, I am Bear-Lents. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great night.